We did it. We are live. We're back on Facebook. We are recording. It's all working out. So how wonderful. I will start this again, and I'm going to start by just giving a brief introduction. And first of all, thank you for everyone who is watching or jumps on for our, thank you for your patience on our technical difficulties here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Helen Bello. I'm the director of Welcome Home Toronto to a Body, Mind, Spirit connection. Welcome Home promotes mindfulness, oneness, and community through meditation classes, through workshops, and special events such as this one tonight, our Conscious Cafe. And this is where you learn how to consciously grow in the direction of the life that you desire. And with me this evening is our regular Conscious Cafe, my sidekick, Dr. Mitch Abrams, who is a Canadian radiologist and musician who's had a unique journey through Western healthcare as a physician, a division chief, and open heart surgical patient. Through his knowledge and experiences, he was granted a unique and intimate perspective into our current healthcare model. As a result, Dr. Abrams has cultivated a deeper understanding of medicine and life with humor, depth, inspiration, and I would say also a whole lot of heart. He shows us what we can do as individuals to foster better health outcomes for ourselves, our communities, and for the world. He is the founder of Next Gen Health, and Next Gen Health continues to grow organically, connecting schools with community organizations, particularly organizations working through marginalized communities like our retired population, through educational, art-based mindfulness programs. And then we have a special guest with us today, and thank you. I'm so excited to meet you and to have you with us. And it is Amy Boudreau, who is known as the Yoga Cop. And Amy has spent the last 9 years as a police officer with a specialty in crime prevention. Amy serves as a mental health ambassador, community liaison for the Canadian Society of Evidence-Based Policing, and is a part of the First Responder Mindfulness Network, run by the Ministry of the Solicitor General Corrections Employee Wellness Unit. In 2016, Amy attended the International Meditation Center located in Chiang Mai, Thailand, for meditation training. And in 2017, she began organizing meditation sessions at a local temple for police employees. At the same time, she launched her The Yoga Cop social media platforms to advocate education, inspire, and spread awareness on wellness. She also holds a corporate yoga certification and trauma-sensitive yoga certification, and has practiced yoga and meditation in her personal life for the last 12 years. So welcome, Amy and Mitch. Of course, it's always wonderful to have you and see you and
Thank you, Helen.
share great conversations with you. So, Mitch, I'm going to let you start it off.
Okay, well, thank you, Helen. It's always a pleasure. It's always a blessing to be here with you. And welcome, Amy. This is really exciting because Amy and I have been chatting for some time now, and been looking at ways to collaborate and to connect, because we both believe that in this world where healthcare and policing, there's a common link, and community health is something that is an area where first responders and policing in particular can play a really interesting role, and have been. And now with the advent of new technologies and a better understanding of ourselves and our relationships to each other, this really kind of creates new opportunities. And so this is kind of what we wanted to talk about today. And what I thought I would do, though, is that before, and just to kind of give Amy a little background on what we do, this is just like radiology rounds. Like when I was in training, I've created a piece, an image, like a piece of art, and I'm just going to ask you to kind of, Tell us what you see. How does it make you feel? And, just kind of relevant ideas that are conjured up by the image. But before we do that, because I thought that there might be some people who are watching for the very first time, I thought I'd just give a little bit of background on this concept of coherence, because I know we're going to talk about this. And so I just going to have a very brief opportunity. I'm just going to share my screen and give a very brief overview of coherence. Now, let me just... Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You see my screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So very quickly, I mean, what we're really talking about, what we have been talking about with the Conscious Cafe over the last couple of months, is this understanding of energy from both Western scientific perspective and an Eastern ancient spiritual perspective. There's really a connection here, and when we discuss energy, it's really a spectrum. So a lot of our conversations that we've been having really helps people understand a framework of energy that really reframes, an understanding of who we are as individuals and as a community, how we're all interconnected. And this comes about by really understanding energy from this new perspective. And what is fascinating is that this mind, body, spirit, or in the literature, we call it the bio-psychosocial model of care. And the mind and the body, we know, are inherently connected, and your thoughts have a profound effect on your physiology. And that blue circle, the social or the spirit, that really represents how connected you feel to others. Now, how this all really comes together is very simple. Just to give you context, if we were to look on the top left of the screen, that represents your emotion. Your emotions affect your nervous system. Very simple. Your autonomic nervous system, which really controls 90% of your entire physiology in your body. And your autonomic nervous system is made up of two pathways, your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. Your parasympathetic acts like your brakes. Your sympathetic system, that acts like your gas pedal. Now, when you are when you are active in an emotional state, your nervous system, which is active, it actually sends signals to your heart. And those signals are either really well coordinated or can be very discoordinated and incoherent. And it all depends on what you're feeling. So to give you an example, we call this idea of coherence. Coherence occurs that when you are feeling really positive, either you're in a state of patience or love, confidence, what happens is that the brake and the gas pedal are very well coordinated, and those signals are going to the heart, and it creates a heart rhythm that you can see on the right-hand side, very normal and very regular. As opposed, if you're angry or frustrated, perhaps you're feeling, in a sense, you're in a state of fear, the gas pedal and the brake become extremely incoherent. It becomes like you're driving your car with both pedals at the same time, and those signals going to the heart creates a very irregular heart rhythm. And we can see on the left that's called incoherent. And the reason why that this is so important is that these signals from the heart actually go up to the brain, and either a coherent signal or an incoherent signal, it actually affects how your brain functions. And so how you perceive the reality, how you are able to think logically is all affected by what type of signal is coming from the heart. And not just affecting the heart and the heart affecting your brain, but we also realize, and we now understand, that the heart is sending out signals to your environment. And in fact, it creates a magnetic field. And that field is actually affecting other people. So this kind of new chapter in healthcare, all around coherence, helping people understand how your thoughts, your emotions affect your heart affects your brain, which then affects how you think, how you perceive information, but it also is affecting people around you on a very subconscious level. And it turns out that if you're in a state of coherence, you're able to induce other people into a state of coherence even without them even understanding what coherence is. So with all that being said, and again, if this is very new to you and you're interested to learn more, please, you can check out all the archived videos on Facebook, on Helen, on Welcome Home Toronto. There's tons of material where we discuss this in greater detail. We take a lot more time, but this was just to give you a bit of context. So I'm going to stop talking. And, oh, I should mention, and this is something I'm sure Amy will be discussing, but the reason why this is so important is that when large groups of people are in a state of coherence together, we've had studies showing that crime rate actually decreases. And this is an example in a peer-reviewed journal. Over 8 weeks, a group of people came together. They focused on love and compassion for a community, and crime rate actually dropped by 23%. And this has been verified in other peer-reviewed research multiple times. So this is why it's so important that we have these conversations and we start educating the public and getting people really engaged in this understanding of coherence. Okay, so Amy, this is a image, and you can take your time. There's lots of kind of interesting things that we can talk about, but whenever you're ready, feel free to jump in and just kind of describe what you see. How does it make you feel? And what is it that you'd like to talk about?
So just, I mean, initially looking at it, you know, the concept there is different experiences. You know, whether they're interpreted as positive or negative, and how that affects a person's heart and their physiology, right? You know, especially kind of what's going on now within our community, and coming from a place of understanding from both sides and bringing that together, working together to achieve social coherence together. So I think it's the image is very moving, and it kind of speaks to some of the conversations that are being had right now and that need to be had.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, and just going along some of the points that you've mentioned about how coherence works. You know, just to kind of paint a picture on an average day on what officers can experience. You know, we're often entering situations that are unknown and entering situations that could be potentially a risk for, you know, our personal safety. So oftentimes, you know, our bodies are in a state, a stressful state. All of these changes, when you talk about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, we're often in a state of sympathetic nervous system where, you know, it's a stress response. You know, certain situations may feel as a threat. But the one thing that can happen over time is if people don't have, you know, the skill set, you know, if officers don't have a skill set on knowing how to come down out of that state into a more equilibrium and more coherent, calm state, you know, oftentimes that now can get set as our default, where you're constantly in this state all the time. And, you know, when you're constantly in a state of stress, you're more likely to, you know, your performance is going to go down. You might overreact about certain situations. There might be emotional triggers. Because when you're in that stressful state, there's, you know, you get tunnel vision, your heart rate goes up, your hands can start shaking, your breathing is going a lot more quicker. All of these different changes are happening, and, you know, you can have tunnel vision, you can lose audio, being able to hear what's going around. So you kind of lose touch with the present moment and your senses, and really slowing things down and taking a step back and, you know, So that's why it's really important that officers and, you know, the general population they practice self-regulation techniques to help, you know, in those situations, and not just police officers, but when there's a perceived threat, you know, and a perceived threat nowadays could be, you know, an email from your boss that you get, or a conflict or an argument or a disagreement with a coworker. It doesn't necessarily mean, you know, there's different levels of threat, but our body doesn't know the difference, and it's still going to react the same way. So, you know, when you develop this sense of awareness and how you're feeling in those moments, and, you know, why are certain things triggering you that way, it now allows you to, you know, focus on your breathing to kind of bring your system back down. If you redirect your thoughts, you know, to more renewing, heartful state, you know, like you said, compassion, empathy, coming from a place, you know, you're changing, you know, how you're feeling in that moment to kind of bring yourself down. You know, those are the things that we need to practice, you know, as officers. And I think that we're at a stage where a lot of different organizations are looking into, you know, mindfulness, building awareness, building resiliency, you know, which is preparing for recovering from and adapting in the face of stress, adversity, trauma, different tragedies, especially as officers. Like, we're dealing with that on a regular basis. And if it goes, you know, untreated, let's say, for a long time, then that's where you can start to see maybe you're not as effective in your job. Maybe you're not as compassionate as you could be, or you're reacting instead of responding. You know, when you have that level of awareness, you're able to hold space. It gives you a few more, you know, seconds or minutes to kind of reassess the situation, and again, kind of look at what your options are, and really just slowing things down. So, yeah, there's a lot in that.
I love that. I find it's really fascinating, Amy, because one of the things that you were mentioning about is when you're in this acute situation, you know, your body, you're in a sympathetic overdrive state. So, you know, like you said, you can get tunnel vision, you know, you can start, your heart obviously will speed up. You can feel it pumping in your chest. And it's interesting because this concept of coherence is also being used to help officers, even, you know, in Army, to be able to really focus their situational awareness. And I find it so interesting that the same techniques that help a police officer create situational awareness so that they become fully aware of all, you know, a situation, physical and non-physical, you know, to help really engage with every situation as unique as they are. It's also the same science that's helping you connect with people on a very deep level that has a profound influence on the community. So it's the science of peak performance. When you need to have that performance, it's not like we're talking about techniques that will put you to sleep and make you all zenned out in a meditative state. It actually can help people in, you know, in a high performance situation like your job, but at the same time, it's the same techniques that help you connect to yourself, connect to other people. And, you know, it goes well beyond just the individual. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it definitely is. And even just coming back to that situational awareness, you know, when you're able to self-regulate to that level and have that level of self-awareness, you know, let's say you're at a call, you're able to just take in through your senses, because your senses, you're having a direct experience, as opposed to, you know, maybe your thoughts are going in your head, you know, how you're going to handle this call. You're thinking about all these different things. When you're not present, and you know, you might miss something, or you might, you know, not recognize something, or maybe you missed what somebody was saying. You're not taking in the full experience or the full information. You know, and that's why a lot of people do train, you know, like elite athletes, in the military, police, practicing situational awareness. And what does that mean? And again, when you're in the moment, it's easy for your body to take over with these responses because it's a primal unconscious response. So when you practice this, when you're not, let's say, in the chaos or in that moment in the call, you're better able to adapt in that situation. And when you practice on your own in these, let's say you're at home and there's different type of techniques through breathing, whether it's meditation, somatic therapies like yoga. Again, it's bringing that level of consciousness to yourself so that you learn what's happening to your body and what do those sensations feel like, so that you can recognize that and then ultimately make decisions based and changes based on what you're feeling. So, and again, it comes down to a level of emotional intelligence too. And I think, like to the point that you're making, it's not even just about your level of emotional intelligence and how you're operating, thinking and feeling and reacting, but also for that other person, and being able to recognize the tone of the voice, the facial expressions, maybe what they need in that moment, so that you're able to calm them down, de-escalate the situation. I've had many times where people are, if someone's calling police, there's usually reason for it. And, a lot of people can be really ramped up and really excited and upset or scared, angry, you name it. And, it's my job to go in and be neutral, try to de-escalate that situation. And that's what, officers are trained to do. And, even just having that calm voice, or, just like you mentioned, Mitch, if my heart rate, if I have that under check and I'm walking into a situation, I'm better able to calm the situation, in those circumstances based on my own physiology and how I'm interacting in that situation.
Absolutely. And I think that is so important. I mean, I know this is a different scenario, but I see it all the time in the hospital. You have patients who are scared, they're anxious, they're afraid. There's so much unknown, and that causes so much anxiety. And at the same time, you've got, nursing, you have healthcare staff who are exhausted, they're burned out, they're frustrated, they're overworked. And at times it can be like two freight trains coming together. And, you can see situations, where really are unfortunate, and they can be avoided if there was an opportunity to connect at a deeper level, and if people were, had that capacity to connect to themselves at a deep level, because that deep connection to self allows connection to others, ultimate connection. And I feel like, so much of that happens in your, day to day, on the streets, dealing with people who need help, and for whatever reason.
I like that you brought up, the healthcare environment, because I think, like you mentioned earlier, policing and the healthcare system are very much integrated with the work that we do. We're on the front lines. We're dealing with people who are suffering in certain situations. They're feeling a certain way, and as healthcare practitioners, nurses, doctors, et cetera, and then as well as police officers, we're coming into these situations, and ultimately how we handle a situation can either exacerbate how they're feeling. Are we causing more harm, or are we actually like helping people? And, that's why it is so important to be aware of, having a level of empathy, compassion, understanding that don't take things personally all the time, because it's not about you, it's about the state that they're in, and what piece of information or help can you give to that person in the time that they need it the most. And, what I find too is a lot of times, it doesn't help the situation the more forceful you are. And I get that, especially in a policing situation, it's constantly moving, you're constantly having to reassess all the time, and it can change any minute. And we do deal with a lot of great citizens, but we also deal with some people who, are unsavory at times, and it can be challenging to deal with certain people. But, when you're calm and there's a level of respect, I usually find that people, often will give it back to you, respectfully, when you're treating them a certain way. And again, like when you talk about relationships too, and, for policing anyhow, is you never know when you're going to come across somebody again, or the next time maybe you need their assistance for something. So, people are going to remember how you treated them. And so it goes a long way. And another thing too is, when you're dealing with a particular person, it's not necessarily just the one person. It could be a whole family. It could be a group of friends. It could be, because when that person has an experience, and let's say it was unsatisfactory, it's going to draw in an opinion or a perspective, and then that's going to be shared with other people. And it's unfortunate that there's times where, maybe there's a certain doctor or nurse, or there's a certain police officer that maybe didn't do their job the best during that time. And sometimes people don't do it on purpose. Maybe they're having a bad day. Like you said, they're overworked, burnt out. They're dealing with their own grief, their own loss, their own stress and trauma from the nature of the job. And sometimes it can come off a certain way. And, so again, it's just having those practices in place, knowing that there's a much larger, a farther outreach when you're interacting with people on a day-to-day basis like that.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely. I agree 100%. I find it's interesting. I mean, we talked about this before, Amy, about, this concept of warrior and police. This is really relevant to the world of law and order, where warrior can really be seen as two types. The physical warrior, where you just don't take shit and, you come on strong to take control of a situation. But then the other warrior is this inner warrior, the spiritual warrior, where you've got so much inner control, so much inner self-awareness and self-actualization, that by you controlling yourself and being, a warrior from within, allows you to have control of a situation on a much more fine and subconscious level. Mm-hmm. And, I'm wondering your thoughts on that, because imagine if you're a spiritual warrior, mm-hmm. And you have a colleague who is more of a physical warrior, they might not see or really mm-hmm. appreciate what it is that you're bringing to the table. But yet I truly believe, we are all in positions to lead by example. Mm-hmm. And, this is where, again, the role of police, I think, can now start to transcend, to become mm-hmm. much more pivotal in education and community health, in these kind of, in this way that's not just mm-hmm. about, an acute situation.
Yeah, I like that point that you brought up. And, there's this idea, there's always like the warrior versus the guardian. At the end, like, we are peace officers. Yeah, we have a job to do, and there's times where we need to be assertive or aggressive or use force based on what the situation is when it's needed. But there's also, everyone's going to react differently. Everybody has their subjectivity and their perspective. How I might react in a situation might be different from you based on your personal experiences, your upbringing, your training, etc. And when you do internal work that way, to have this state of inner calm, again, it's, a lot of the times, a lot of the stuff that they would often talk about, even with a lot of the meditation classes that I've taken at the temple, is, the world's happening around you, things are happening, and, you kind of lose your power when you allow certain people or situations to change your inner state and to get that rise out of you. And it's not about not having emotion or having a reaction. It's just recognizing how you respond in certain situations. And like, I might be more calm, let's say at a call where, let's say another officer would instantly want to start shouting at somebody or being a certain way. And, maybe an officer would think of that as like, well, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you doing this? Or why aren't you doing that? And again, everyone's going to have their own level of how they police. And, when you're in a more calm state, you can assess the situation as needed. And, obviously, like I said, when you need to use force, you use it. But oftentimes, and like we are trained, is to de-escalate the situation, use your communication to try to bring the situation down. So, and I think we are trained that way too. And again, it comes down to that everybody's an individual as well with their perspectives on the situation. So I think that's why it is important to keep training that way and build that into some of the training. I know a lot of organizations are starting to, you know, in their requalification and scenario practices, actually use visualization and use breathing techniques to remind somebody to come back down to the present moment and, you know, change their body state that way. I think, you know, as officers, we're recognizing there needs to be a change in how we police, not even just not even just for ourselves and making sure that we can last 30 years in this type of career long term and be healthy, but also the level of engagement that we have with our community, and the value that they bring to the table, because it's not police alone. We actually need our community members to help with the fight against crime. And how do you do that? You engage them to the point where, you know, it's not just talking with people out on the street and that's community engagement. Real engagement is actually bringing people to the table who are giving information and sharing how to meet their needs. How do they want to be policed as a community, you know, together? And that's when, you know, they join advisory groups, forums, they have a say, there's a voice. It's not just, this is how we're doing things. It's how can we work together? Because the community are the eyes and ears. They're out there. They're just as important as officers. And a lot of times that relationship is what's really going to help solve crime. You know, if we don't have people calling in and reporting things and caring about their community to be safe, then, you know, it just makes our job more difficult to try to, because we can't be everywhere at once. So again, just coming back to the idea of you know, somebody's mentality of you know, in policing. And I think it is important as an officer to recognize that you have to have both sides. You have to be able to, you know, be assertive when you need to be, but most of the time we're dealing with a lot of great community members, and you need to treat them with a level of respect. And even if somebody does commit a crime, you know, people make mistakes in this world, and it doesn't mean they're a horrible person or they're a bad person. You know, and to get away from like labeling, you know, people and, you know, discriminating against them based on, you know, how they live their life. Let's say if they come from like a low income area, or they have other circumstances that they're born into. And, you know, that's why, again, officers are trained here in Canada on implicit bias training and other types of training to make sure that we are being fair and having those self-checks in those moments too.
It's very interesting. You know, I found something that you were talking about that really resonated with me was this concept of resonation, to resonate. Because this idea that just as your heart and your rhythms can affect other people, and could potentially even de-escalate, you know, a certain situation through your sense of calmness. When people walk into a situation, if an individual is not really self-aware, then they are now very susceptible to other people's rhythms. And so, you know, as an officer, you know, if this was not part of the education, you know, it creates susceptibility that they can be reacting to the situation on a very subconscious level. You know, their heart rhythms are going to start to resonate with other people's rhythms, and that, you know, will affect cognition, and, you know, it prevents the higher evolved part of our brains to function, and it allows the lesser evolved parts of the brain to take over. And so I thought that was really interesting. You know.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's funny because there's studies too that show that people will mirror other people's behaviors in a conversation. So if, you know, put my hand up here, or put my hands in my pockets, or you got your leg up on the curb, or, you know what I mean? And it's, so people unconsciously are in a social situation to feel comfortable. And again, if you don't have that level of awareness, then yeah, you could easily be susceptible to now the other person is now controlling the situation, and you're mimicking them, or you're now influenced by maybe their state, right? And I remember in high school too, it was like sport teams. If you were playing, and if you played the worst team, and then all of a sudden you would not play as well. If you were playing a really good team, you would play really well, and you would kind of showcase some of those skill sets and kind of the level, whether you were leveling up or not in some of those circumstances. And even at an organizational level too. Last year, I went and saw Dr. David Klinger speak at the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing, and one of the things that he brought up was high reliability organizations. So these high reliability organizations are often organizations that are very complex and have the potential for a catastrophic outcome. So this could be aircraft controller or working at like a nuclear power plant or something like that. So their idea is reviewing, just any inattentive or routine in your job. There's no room for that, because that's where mistakes can happen. If you get, complacent, let's say, in your daily duties. So the idea is to have a level of awareness to the point that, you're reviewing any type of mistake or any type of behavior that goes on a daily basis, because it can remedy any like problem solving, right? And if you're in routine or you're inattentive, that's where mistakes can happen. So it's building this organizational mindset as a culture, to understand some of the stuff that we're talking about, and how you do your job on a larger scale, and how it's going to affect other people out in the community, right? So building that mindset internally through the culture. So I thought that was really interesting, and it just reminded me of some of the stuff we're talking about, because I feel like there's different layers. There's the individual and the work that you put in on yourself to get to that level, and how it affects the community, but also your own shift, let's say your own platoon or your own unit that you work in, at the hospital, the coworkers that you work with, how does that affect them if you're in a coherent state, and how are they getting along with each other and working together collectively? And then at that level, it moves from there to, the leadership as well. What does the leadership look like, in the organization, at the organizational level, and then again into the community? So everything is interconnected. And that's why I always tell people too, one person makes a difference. It doesn't matter if, sometimes people think, well, what am I going to do, or what can I do? It's like, even if it's just one person making a difference within themselves and then at the community, that's huge, because you have the exponential outreach, right? So yeah, not to underestimate the power that you have to create impact, social impact in what you're doing.
Absolutely.
I love that, Amy. I love the idea of, I believe that organizations should be part of that culture on an organizational development level. But then when it's handed to each individual to take responsibility for their own level of coherence, their own level of consciousness, and really understand what their triggers are and what they need to do to take care of themselves, so that they do show up in that place of being able to affect change in a really positive manner. And I think that's where, the individual work that people can do is so rich. It's diverse now. There's so much yoga, meditation, the heart math work, the brain mapping. There's so many great things that people can use as techniques and tools to continue to work on themselves and build their emotional intelligence, their spiritual intelligence. And of course, then that does affect their physical well-being as well.
Yeah, I love that, because just coming back to the meditation, you know, let's say someone in policing might say, well, what does meditation have to do with policing? Well, there is actually studies now that show that you can change your brain, you know, neuroplasticity. And there's studies that show that meditation actually increases gray matter in centers of your brain that are so I think it's the hippocampus, but it's self-awareness, introspection, which is having that level of awareness to look at yourself internally on how are you thinking, how are you feeling, and making those changes. And then it shrinks the gray matter in the amygdala, which is the center for stress, the center for anxiety, and the center that keeps you on autopilot, where you're just kind of, you know, going along and you're not actually paying attention to your environment or what you're sensing or being present. You're thinking, you know, and then there's two narratives. There's, or two, I guess, brain circuitries that you could, that we're usually in. One is the default, which is the narrative, you know, it's your planning in the future, your plans, or you're thinking about the past, or what you got to do, what you're going to have for dinner. And then the other one is direct experiencing, but that one's not our default. It's the other ones where constantly our mind's going. So you actually have to sit down. You know, you don't have to sit down, but I just mean like in your daily practices, practicing trying to be more, you know, when we say mindfulness, it's a level of awareness. You know, you've got your mind is full of all these, you know, thoughts, or your mind full in the sense of your level of awareness. So when you slow down and you actually try to be present, that's kind of like doing a you know, like a bicep curl, let's say, for your mind. And we often, you know, do workouts for our body. We focus on our diet. We focus on all these external, you know, these other things, but we don't often do work for our brains, for our mind. And when you do these types of practices, yoga, which is movement, you know, it's movement meditation really, and your breath work, and you're focusing on yourself internally, you know, and these meditative practices of trying to have, you know, like body scans, or kind of to what you were saying, Mitch, like having that heart focused, you know, bringing renewing energy and emotions into your body. Having those types of practices will actually benefit you, not in only your personal life, but whatever your vocation is, whatever you decide to put your mind to, setting your goals, doing a better job at work, everything. It touches your life, and not even just yours, we just talked about, but your families, the people you come in contact with. So that's why I think these practices are so important to bring into the policing world, and that's why I advocate for some of that.
Also, you know, what you were saying about relational presence and being connected to what is in the moment. I mean, technically, that is our natural state of being. We were born that way. We learned. We have all this imprinting from what we learned based on our experiences, and we created an idea about ourselves in relationship to our experience, or ideas about other people, how to behave, what to do, and how we relate to others. And so, yeah, it keeps us, all that imprinting keeps us from being present, because we are either in our history, dredging it up and ruminating about it and dragging it into the present day, or we are futurizing, and it is like, okay, what am I going to have for dinner? How am I going to manage this? What am I going to do about that? And we lose the connection to our true self. And so this is where I love meditation and practices that really integrate the mind, the body, and our intuitive knowing to create that level of coherence where we can operate on a completely different level and really rise above the framework that we learned. And so, you know, I think it's so incredible the work that you're doing and with police officers and really bringing this to the forefront, and creating that space for people to really expand in their own minds and get to know themselves in a whole new way. I would also learn to relate to others in a different way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you talked about getting to know yourself again, because we often don't take time to understand how we're operating. And a lot of how we're reacting, or the habits we have, or how we're feeling, or the triggers that we might have, sometimes they're not ours. Sometimes there's maybe our parents or somebody else somewhere along the line as you were growing up. Something happened and you made a decision, unconsciously, that this is how the world is. So if you don't take the time to get to know yourself and how you operate, and ask yourself, like, well, why is that affecting me? And why am I feeling this way when this person says this, or during this situation? If you can't actually like reflect and find out why you're doing what you're doing, and a lot of people might not do it because they don't know what to do, or like you're like, how do I figure this out? But you have to do the work. And and I tell people, like, and I'm not by any means an expert, I've been on a health journey for a long time, but you have to find out what's best for you. There isn't like a cookie cutter type of thing that's going to work for somebody. Some people, there's all these different modalities that are out there, and you have to find what works for you. But you have to sit down and you have to know yourself. You have to get to know yourself. You have to do the work, and then that's how the answers kind of come, and you can figure out and make those changes. But that's why the understanding the self and reconnecting with it is so important, as well as this whole coherence aspect.
Absolutely. And that foundation is laid down in the first 7 years of our childhood. It is that imprinting is like right in there, and it starts to run the show. And I work in a 7-day experiential retreat of really looking and helping people understand that these ideas and beliefs and ways of reacting in situations, that they are learned. It's not who they are, right? But we can't just unlearn them intellectually, because we didn't learn them intellectually. We learned them emotionally and experientially, and they're living in our subconscious mind. It's like, if we could just step into consciousness and go, okay, I won't be that way anymore, ever, that would be just magical. But it just...
Yeah. And I like that point that you just brought up, because when I did the trauma sensitive yoga and I was learning about how our bodies react unconsciously, and a lot of times, people want to, let's talk about it, let's talk it out. But sometimes in the early stages, and because they did studies with like military veterans who had come back from the war, and some had very severe, like twitches and other types of things in their body, because, let's say if a bomb went off, and that person's turning, like the experience is remembered as a sensation, because, you're not thinking about this, like in that moment, and they call the gut the second brain, right? So you have this force field around you that's sensing and understanding, which is an intelligence within you that you're not really aware of, but it's taking in stuff from the environment as a situation's happening. So oftentimes it will start with a sensation, remembered as a sensation, turns into an emotion or feeling, and then now it goes up into a thought, and then you're thinking about the experience. So you have to kind of work in that reverse. And they're saying for people who've gone through really traumatic experiences, trauma sensitive yoga is amazing, because you reconnect with the sensations in your body, and you can reorganize how your body has remembered these triggers or these emotional traumas or stresses that you've experienced. And it's like you reorganize them to help release them in your body, because it can get trapped in your system. So doing some of these practices actually helps realign, remove some of those stored traumas, in our bodies. And then at that point, you kind of work from the sensation in the body, and then, then you can start talking about it, or other types of ways to kind of move through those experiences.
It's really, I love this conversation. I try to explain it in the context of, like a reflex, a knee reflex. When we tap the patellar tendon, you have a little kick, a reflex. And as we're discussing, we're, as Helen is saying, we learn about, these experiences in relation to the world that we're experiencing, and we start imprinting, these emotions. And eventually what happens is we create these reflexes. So essentially when something similar happens, we conjure up the same thoughts, we conjure up the same reaction mentally, just as we would like a reflex in the knee. And, as you were saying, Amy, it's, when you do these somatic techniques, or you do yoga and ways to connect to the body, you're eventually, you're really unlearning, you're rewiring, and you're engaging energies that are perhaps stuck in certain areas of the body, and it works itself out. It's an amazing experience. And, what I find the most frustrating thing, particularly in medicine, is that we can talk about it to patients and the people until we're blue in the face, but it's the experiential learning, it's the experience. So, the three of us, we all have our own individual practices. We know this is truth. We know that this is real. This is profound. This is a game changer when it comes to personal health, global health. But it's, okay, how do we get the masses? How do we get people who are, let's say, not, this isn't even on their radar at this point? Mm-hmm. How can we help them get to this moment, and get them, engaged with self? And I believe, policing as much as healthcare, I think is going to be on the forefront of this, engagement, this community engagement, where it's educating, it's connecting, it's activism, on such, on a deep level of self and relationship to each other.
Yeah. And I like the idea that you said about creating this experience. When I was in university and I was just starting to learn about, energy, human energy, chakras, and, how our body operates and those types of things, I was interested. That's when I was first getting into meditation and yoga for the first time back in 2008. And, there was a person that I had met who was talking about some of this stuff. And I was like, listen to this person. Like, I was very skeptic. I thought it was, kind of woo-woo stuff. And until I joined up, we did this documentary where we were going to take our blood work before and after this 30-day period. We were going to change our diet. We were going to, try to, do some of these renewing, emotions. And we were going to experience some different types of energy work and like meditation we were going to try. And one of the meditations or a visualization exercise that we did, it was for 40 minutes. And we all took samples of our pH. So we had the litmus paper to see where we were at. So most of us were all acidic. And a lot of people would say, well, you can't change your pH. It would take a couple days. You have to eat and drink water. That would change, like that it's alkaline or acidic. Anyway, we did this guided meditation where we visualized our pH balance changing, and we took our litmus test afterwards, and it was alkaline. And it's just, so those types of experiences where you're just like, there's no way this works. And then you have an experience where you're like, wow, I feel different, or this just happened, and this, and then that kind of creates the belief that, okay, there's something to this. I should maybe incorporate some of this into my life. So again, everyone's at a different level of consciousness or awareness. And I think you have to meet people where they're at. And, and if you can provide an opportunity for someone, not even just educating them, but provide them an experience, they're more likely to see themselves, developing those skill sets and actually wanting to try it a little bit more.
I love that. Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's providing experiences for people, I think, is key. There's a beautiful proverb that I read that, is I had a beautiful dream, but if I were to tell you my dream, you'll likely forget it. If I act out my dream, you perhaps might remember it. But if I include you in my dream, it becomes your dream too.
Mm.
And I believe, what it resonates with what you're saying, that people, if we can give people the opportunities for the experience, it will change a lot of lives. It'll change an outlook and change the global trajectory.
I love that. It gave me chills.
Yeah.
Good.
Beautiful.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
just quickly, I watched a TED Talk this morning that one of my colleagues sent me, because we're doing these wellness projects, and so we'll do these little meditation stretches, or we'll just share articles that we see that could be relevant. So it was a talk by Lucy Hone, and the title was 3 Secrets of Resilient People. And what she talks about is giving people hope. And when people, so she gave 3 strategies that will help people to move through different adversity that they have in their lives. Because the first one, which is, it's the best to start with, is everybody has adversity. Whether that's childhood experiences, whether you're an officer and you've experienced things on the road, whether you've had a loss in in your family and you're grieving, there's a list of all sorts of things that people experience that are really hard times, So what she says is if you recognize that it's a part of life and everybody experiences some, it helps you accept what you can change and what you can't, and having that level of acceptance. And then she said the second thing is tuning into the good, because we often focus on the negative things that are happening, and we can dwell on them, and it's part of our evolution, because that's what's kept us alive. When there's a threat, you need to run away from it. But if you can practice having 3 things that you're grateful for each day, and get in the habit of thinking, and focusing on the positive things, even through the hard times, that will help move you forward. And then the last thing is, and the point that she made with the second point was, don't lose what you have to what you've lost. Don't lose what you have to what you've lost. So remember what you have and be grateful for those things, and kind of focus on that. And then the third thing was your behavior and your thoughts and ask yourself, is this helping me or is this hurting me? And if some of the behaviors or the thoughts you're having are hurting you, then you have to work towards making those changes on a daily basis, so that you can improve your life that way too. So ultimately, that's being kind to yourself, having self-compassion as well.
I love it. That's fantastic. I'm going to watch her TED Talk. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful medicine for the soul.
It is, yeah. 5 things that I find that really, I think that help a lot of people is coming back to that self-compassion, knowing that in certain circumstances you can do your best, but it's not always the same outcome that you want. So be gentle with yourself, and because we're our own worst critics, right? Having a level of self-care, so the exercising, the meditation, what are you putting into your body, not drinking a lot of alcohol and smoking and these other types of things, and then having time to relax and take time for yourself, being optimistic as well, looking at on the bright side of things, and having a level of social support, people that you can depend on in some of those times. So those things are really important to kind of help people in their life as well.
Yeah, and I love the level of social support, especially nowadays. It's more important than ever, and for people to be able to reach out and connect and feel supported and feel loved, no matter what they're going through, right? Where we just hold them able, and know that they're, this beautiful soul, and they can go through it, and we'll love them no matter what they're stuff is.
Well, yeah. I love that you're bringing that up too, because, you know, you might not always understand what someone's going through, or you can't relate to some of their experiences, but you can be there for them, and you can be an ally, and you can, you know, advocate, and you can show your support and be that way for other people as well.
I think that's the greatest form of compassion, is seeing that person as able, and yeah, I might not be able to relate to it, but I will still, you know, hold them in love and support them in whatever way they need. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I like that. And, you know, people have a lot of influence. So, you know, whether you're using your platform, whether that's social media, or whether it's just being there one-on-one with a friend, or maybe it's you as a leader in your role, you have the capability to raise the psychological capital, you know, of the people who are around you. And you never know who you can inspire with some of the work that you're doing, you know, or what information you share out there. So I think the work that both of you are doing in your position, you know, and in your communities is huge. I think there needs to be, you know, many people working towards a common goal for the greater good of society. So it's really inspiring to just connect with you both and have these conversations with you both. Yeah.
And with you, Amy.
Likewise, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you so much.
It's been wonderful.
I'm excited. I just met with someone from McGill University from the Mindfulness Research Lab. So I'm going to help with a study coming up with mindfulness meditation in policing. And I'm doing this all in my own time, but I think it's important work. So I'm really excited to connect with them on that, and I'll have to share the results with you afterwards.
Absolutely.
Please do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's fantastic.
Yes. Thank you so much for being with us. And I know you have a busy schedule, and you're doing such great work as well, Amy. I mean, oh my gosh, what you do and the energy that you put out, and the heart and soul that you put into everything that you do is just so beautiful. So beautiful. And you're beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I appreciate you saying that. And it comes from a place of passion and, you know, my heart. I don't get paid for a lot of the externals, you know, extra stuff that I do, but it's because I want to create a difference. And, you know, I'm working with, there's a first responder mindfulness network. And so it's a group of officers. So not even just police officers, but correctional officers, you know, border officers, just people in the justice system, and then researchers. And it's a group from the US, Canada, and Australia. And we're collaborating, sharing research on mindfulness modalities to bring into our respective areas, because we know the importance that it can make. So just kind of moving with that. And I do work with the Advancing We in Policing. We're an Ontario working group as it relates to gender, rank, and race. And yeah, I have a lot of other initiatives that I'm doing. And, you know, one of the reasons why I'm, you know, doing some of these talks, or, you know, doing a couple podcasts or writing articles, I think it's important to get that information out there. And it's not just educating, you know, other officers on the importance of it, but also making those connections, building trust and respect, and humanizing the badge within the community as well. So, you know, I think we're at an evolutionary stage in policing, where we have changes that are happening, and so I think it's all coming together when it's needed, definitely. And I'm excited to be part of it.
Oh, congratulations! That's awesome. Fantastic.
It's amazing. Goes to show you when you're passionate about something, you know, I mean, you have so much on your plate, Amy, like so much, and yet, you know, like you have energy for it. You bring it on, you take it on, and you know, that's just pure passion. It comes from, you know, like you said, a place where you just want to give back to others. And that, I believe, is the key element, the key ingredient for success. However you want to define success, you will achieve it because you have that integrity. You want to do good for others. And that's, I think, kind of where we're evolving as a species. You know, this is our evolutionary leap as we move forward.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for your service. I think the world's going to be a
Thank
much
you.
brighter, more peaceful, especially the community of Toronto will be a much more peaceful space, having you as part of the change.
Yeah, and I'm just finding I'm connecting with all these wonderful people who are doing similar work. You know, Mitch, the work that you're doing, and we met at the Mindfulness Canada Symposium, and we were talking about mindfulness. But you know, you're talking about it from a healthcare perspective, and you know, I'm talking about it from policing. And there's other organizations out there who are, you know, Operation Prefrontal Cortex, who are trying to bring mindfulness meditation into different priority neighborhoods where there's violence, you know, out in the community to educate people in the schools, you know, in our jail system. And I think there's a lot of people that are recognizing all the positive that we can be doing with some of the research that's out there to show that, you know, the benefits that you get from this. So
absolutely. Yeah. It's exciting time. It's exciting time to be alive and to witness, you know, what we're experiencing.
And, you know, I know right now it's a bit uncomfortable too. You know, we just had this pandemic, we're still in the pandemic really. And some people are maybe on edge, and, you know, there's this need for connection and, you know, peer support and resources on mental health and coping, self-regulation strategies and stuff like that. So, and then moving from, you know, into some of the hard conversations that need to be had about racism. You know, I think everything, you know, when change happens, sometimes it can feel uncomfortable because we're moving out of the status quo and what's always been the way to now shifting our perspective to a higher level of we need to be doing something better. You know, and so that can spark, you know, uncomfortable conversations that are needed in order for us to be moving forward. So I think that's kind of where we're at too. And it's kind of shaken things up, you know, and I think there's going to be a lot of positive changes coming from this, which are needed.
Absolutely. They're uncomfortable conversations, and they're also courageous conversations. And when both sides can maintain a place of coherence, then it opens us up to really hearing the perspective of other people and coming to a new understanding. So it is needed, and it's happening, and it's great.
Yes.
It's exciting. Yes. Well, thank you both. We're at just over an hour, which is fantastic. I'm glad you were able to get on with us, Amy. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Amy.
And Mitch, thank you as well.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Helen. Thank you for making this possible.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.